Hi, I'm Jim Ward of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode in our History Bite series. Today we will discuss the attack on the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, when American Airlines Flight 77 was hijacked and slammed into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. For many, images of the towers in New York crumbling into a mountain of debris or the sight of black smoke billowing from the Pentagon, a symbol of America's military strength, may conjure up memories like it was yesterday, especially for those who lived every minute of the attack. Although 9/11 is remembered for the tragic events that occurred, it all started like any other Tuesday at the Pentagon. The typical hustle and bustle was well underway. Over 23,000 service members and civilians quickly filled up the parking lots, hurried throughout corridors and halls, checked schedules, planned meetings, and settled into desks spread out across 3.7 million square feet of office space. One of those service members, Colonel Marilyn Wills, was among the many soldiers inside the building that September morning. Despite living 16 miles from work, Wills was on the road before the sun was up. It was a rushed morning for her. In a break in tradition, Wills didn't get to pray with her family or see her two daughters off to school. "You know, in the Army, if you're on time, you're late," she said during a media event. "So I got there at least 15 minutes early. It's always cold in the building to me, so I went back to my office on the second floor and grabbed my Army sweater." Around this time, Mark Lewis, who was the senior official performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, was also starting his day. In those days, Lewis was an Army colonel and the director of plans and resources for the Army G1. With year-end resources and manpower on his mind, then Colonel Lewis hoped to meet with Lieutenant General Timothy Maude, the Army Deputy Chief of Staff of Personnel. But according to Lewis, Debbie Ramser, Maude's secretary, said the general was on a tight schedule, but would try to fit Lewis and a colleague in later that morning. This was around 9:15 a.m. With the general backed up with work, Lewis said he left the G1's office. As Lewis walked down the hallway, the building jolted. Fumes of jet fuel filled the corridor. It was American Airlines Flight 77, a jetliner hijacked by 5 Saudi men affiliated with Al-Qaeda. It was deliberately crashed into the Pentagon. Moments later, people were running around, Lewis said. They were coming downstairs, which was also on fire, grabbing people on the neck, but they weren't particularly shrieking or crying that I can remember. Instead, they were trying to find a way to safety. Many were directed to the end of Corridor 4, where it connects to the A-ring of the building, which, quote, just happened to be my office, Lewis said. The office space Lewis worked in had a double door that opened to the A-ring, then led outside of the Pentagon. He helped wedge the doors open and, quote, started shoving people through those offices that could get out of Corridor 4 and into A-ring, he said. Then, of course, away from the fire and out of the building. One of Lewis's co-workers, Roy Wallace, the senior civilian and principal advisor for the Army G1, was nearby. Wallace had left a meeting with Maude and was roughly 50 feet away from American Airlines 77's path of destruction when it hit. Within moments, fire pulled the oxygen from the room where he was standing, he said. Lieutenant General Maude would be the highest-ranking service member killed during the September 11th attacks. Around this time, Jerry Kitzhaber witnessed the blast from his office window. By a twist of fate, he discussed the unfolding events in New York City with his wife, which delayed him from attending a scheduled meeting inside the Pentagon, directly hit by American Airlines 77, he said. Kitzhaber made his way to the Pentagon South parking lot and was still trying to process what had happened. Outside, he talked to a truck delivery driver who witnessed everything. Quote, "The driver said, 'I was just here to deliver my load when I heard a noise and looked up and I saw the plane coming in,' Kitzhaber told reporters. Then he said the pilot just gunned it. The next thing he said took us by surprise. He said he could see the people in the windows of the airplane as it came in." As Kitzhaber processed the news, the other survivors made their way outside the Pentagon. He said watching the F-16 fighter jets screaming across the skies assured him no other planes would fall from the sky. The casualty toll at the Pentagon may have been much worse on September 11th, officials said, without the heroic actions of many soldiers and civilian employees that day. Lieutenant Colonel Ted Anderson carried 2 of the injured away from the burning building. Then he re-entered the smoke-filled Pentagon through a broken window to drag out 2 more injured employees, one whose clothes were on fire. Anderson kicked open an interior door and with the help of 2 others carried a woman out the building and boosted her through the broken window. Then back inside a dark corridor, Anderson said he saw a flash go by and realized a man's clothes were on fire. He tackled the employee and rolled him on the ground to extinguish the flames. After helping the burn victim out through the window, Anderson turned to go back in again, but was stopped by 2 firemen who grabbed his shoulders and struggled to keep him from returning into the flames that had ignited from the jet fuel. Anderson said he was upset with the firemen for not letting him go back. "You don't leave your comrades on the battlefield," said Anderson, a field artillery officer who worked in the office of the Chief of Legislative Liaison. "To me, this was the battlefield." Staff Sergeant Christopher Brayman, a cook at the Pentagon and a ranger at heart, also went back inside the burning Pentagon to assist people. Sheila Moody was clapping her hands, hoping someone would hear her. She couldn't speak because of intense smoke inhalation. Brayman heard her and brought her out. It was Moody's second day on the job, September 11th, and in an appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, she told the world that Brayman was her guardian angel that day. Brayman also helped to find and recover a number of casualties from the Pentagon, volunteering to stay on site into the night working with first responders. He received the Purple Heart for his injuries and the Soldier's Medal for his bravery. Brigadier General Glenn Webster, then Director of Training in the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and Plans, was in the section of the building 1 floor above where the plane hit. He and most of his staff were able to get downstairs and outside before the floor caved in. "Everybody moved quickly into the hallway," Webster said, and then a fireball shot forward along the suspended ceiling. Chunks of the suspended ceiling began to fall, he said, as soldiers checked stairwells for heat and smoke to find the safest way out. He said a few others actually ran atop part of the burning aircraft to get out. Soldiers were helping badly burned and cut personnel out of the building, Webster said. He said other soldiers used debris to break windows open and pull people out. A contract employee who worked with Webster, retired Sergeant Major Ron Schexnader, went back upstairs to get a flashlight to help guide people out. All the lights went off immediately after the big explosion, Schexnader explained. He moved debris out of the way so people could get through. Once outside, Webster helped perform first aid on a number of the fire victims. He treated them for shock by loosening clothing, removing shoes, propping up their feet, and covering them with whatever he could find. He helped a nurse and medic triage the victims and held an IV bag for one patient. Specialist Bo Dobzhansky also helped provide first aid to the injured immediately following the plane crash. A soldier with B Company, 3rd U.S. Infantry, Dobzhansky had been trained as an emergency medical technician before joining the Army. He served as a volunteer firefighter and EMT in Loretto, Minnesota before enlisting. "I come from a family of firefighters," Dobzhansky said. Dobzhansky was working in the Pentagon as a tour guide the morning the aircraft struck the building. The tour guide office is on the opposite end of the building where the plane hit, so Dobzhansky didn't even hear the explosion, but he heard a Navy captain screaming for anyone with medical training. Dobzhansky ran around the building, was stopped by police, so he went around barricades and ran down the George Washington Parkway. He reached Pentagon North parking, where medics from the health clinic were beginning to perform triage on victims of the blast and fire. He joined in to help. He treated a woman who was having trouble breathing and placed a tube down her throat. Then he helped load the woman and about 20 others who were injured into automobiles so they could be taken to a nearby hospital. Dobuzinski then went with a 6-man team into the building where the fire was still blazing. They placed doused rags around their faces and spent an hour in calf-deep water searching for survivors. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was in the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, when American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the building. The secretary ran to the scene and helped evacuate those injured in the attacks. Rumsfeld remained at his post in the National Military Command Center even as the other side of the building burned and smoke threatened to drive workers out of the offices. He coordinated with military commanders around the world for America's response to the terrorist attacks. That night, he held a news conference in the still smoldering building. In the days and weeks after the attack, Rumsfeld worked with foreign leaders as the United States crafted the campaign against Al-Qaeda, the terror group behind the attacks. American forces commenced operations against the group in October 2001 with military attacks in Afghanistan. Nearly 25 years after the attack, the Pentagon is rebuilt and continues to serve as the headquarters for the Department of Defense. A memorial now sits just outside the building, honoring the 59 people on the plane, not counting the 5 hijackers, and 125 people in the Pentagon who died that day. The Pentagon Memorial captures that moment in time at 9:37 a.m. when 184 lives became intertwined for eternity. Elegant and simple, the Pentagon Memorial serves as a timeline of the victims' ages, spanning from the youngest victim, 3-year-old Dana Falkenberg, who was on board American Airlines Flight 77, to the oldest, John D. Yamnicki, 71, a Navy veteran, also on board Flight 77 that morning. Open to the public in 2008, the memorial features 184 illuminated benches, each dedicated to a victim, arranged by year of birth from 1930 to 1998. Each bench hovers above a lighted reflecting pool and is oriented based on whether the victim was on the plane or in the building. Located just outside the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, the serene design invites quiet reflection and remembrance of the lives lost in the attack.